Hey everybody, HMV here, playing more Kerbal Space Program, and today the Jool 5 is launching. It is not named the Jool 5 because it is the fifth of its kind, but instead because it is going to do a Jool 5, kind of. It's just going to land 5 probes, or 4 probes actually, on the 5 moons. At least that's the goal. But anyway, we've been here before, so let's skip to fairing separation where we can see the main ship. Well, we can kind of see the main ship because it's so dark. And it's so dark because we are burning right to Jool from the launch pad. We burn up until we get our encounter, and I love it when a plan comes together. I tweak it with the mid-course correction to nail a nice lathe encounter that gets me into a nice orbit of Jool. That will allow me to pick and choose which moon I go to, which I always like. And while tweaking that encounter with a small Jool SOI maneuver node, I got an encounter with Vol. So I figure, why not go with it? So what I end up with is a nice trajectory that passes by Lathe, encounters Vol, and ends up near Tylo's orbit. So first up in the Julian dance, Lathe. Hello, Lathe. There are 4 little ships attached to the main relay ship, and the first one here is the Lathe Lander. It's designed to take the rigors of atmospheric entry and at least come to a stop on the surface. It can also survive a water landing. And I designed the main ship too, with a little finesse, not lose any solar panels due to the ship's disconnecting. Just a light touch on the gas to send the lander away from the mothership. The lander is coming in for a direct atmospheric insertion, which means most of the fuel was being wasted. Oh well. It also means that before I can even check bat mode, things start exploding. Apparently the ship's not quite so well designed for the rigors of atmospheric entry as I'd thought. I tossed the fuel tank, and I'm just happy that the landing stage survived. I triggered the chutes early so that they'll go even if I run out of power. Somehow, 2 solar panels survived, but they are not providing enough power to kick the probe core on. And because of that, I can't detach the heat shield, so the lander is a bit heavier than I was expecting during the design phase. About now, I'm wondering what the water landing tolerances are for parts. Ouch. But wait, the probe core survived. Success. 20% of the way done, we go back to the main ship and our upcoming encounter with Vol. Ignoring that offset engine shroud, I detached the Vol lander, which is designed exactly the same as the Pole Bop lander, which you'll see later. And with that lander gone, the mothership tweaks its trajectory for the upcoming Tylo encounter. And then disconnects the Pole Bop lander so it can be on its way as well. With a little fiddling, the Pole Bop lander gets an interesting interaction that sends it out towards the 2 outer moons. Very off-center, but with just 1 lander left to deliver, the mothership burns to align with Tylo's orbit. I'll worry about getting an actual encounter later, because we've got Vol to encounter. Coming down low over the surface, we get into a nice low orbit, and then plan our burn to slow down to land. But before we can perform that burn, we notice something. The Pole Bop lander has an encounter with Lathe. Not with Lathe's SOI, mind you, but with Lathe itself. Oops. Just a small correction burn though, and we modified the trajectory to miss Lathe and still have a decent orbit around Jool. Disaster averted. Back to Vol. We don't actually have comms as we're coming down, but they were restored before too long, and I'm able to set up a nice landing burn planner. This ICC looks like the perfect place to come in for a landing. And with judicious use of our diminishing fuel, the lander touches down on Vol's surface. 40% of the way done. And a victory spin. I'm having trouble getting an encounter with Bop, so I put the Pole Bop lander in a parking orbit that won't encounter Tylo or Vol's orbits. Then I set up my mothership and Tylo lander with their Tylo encounter. During the encounter burn, the mothership finally runs out of fuel. That was part of the plan, though. It can function as a relay with no problem just so long as it stays in the Jool system. I disconnect the Tylo lander and do the rest of the burn with it. And a nice encounter it is. Should be easy to nail that orbit and landing. Note, we have comms right now. I set up a maneuver node on the mothership on the next orbit, so I can know whether or not it's going to have any encounters. So far, so good. Hello, Tylo. Please be kind. As we do our slowdown burn, I notice I don't have comms anymore. No big deal. I am behind Tylo and probably just blocked, and I don't need comms to follow a maneuver node retrograde. So I check the network to see when I'll be in comms range again, only to find that I won't. That's right, the mothership has no comms. Is Kerbin blocked? No, we're on the sun side of Jool. Carbon must just be too far away. I knew we were cutting the margins, but I didn't know that they were that close. Oh well, comms will come back eventually, like a year from now, and I can probably nail these landings even without comms. At least probably. What's worse, I set up another predicting maneuver node 16 days away, and I find that indeed we have a collision with Tylo in our near future. So that's it. No more comms. But comms or not, we've got a mission to do, and that mission involves landing on Tylo with only rudimentary controls, including this neat little trick right here to toss aside the spent fuel tank so we won't crash into it when we run retrograde again. Luckily, I over-engineered the Tylo lander, so I've got hundreds of spare meters per second when I slow down to almost nothing. And alternating between full and zero throttle, I explode. But not quite. Success. 60% of the way done. The pole bop lander's fate is not quite so sure. It's got a maneuver node that I need to hit, but I can't aim at it because it's not normal or radial, but a bit of both. So I burn radial and then do a trick where I toggle between normal and standard SAS to kind of aim midway between the two. It takes a few tries, but I get it all right. Luckily, on the very next pass will be near Bob, so I burn retrograde to force the issue, and get an encounter. I'm even able to tweak it close. On the way, we pause for a moment of silence for the mothership. You did your job well. Well, you did your job. Well, you didn't quite do your job, but I'm not blaming you entirely. Just mostly. But hey, you're about to die, so I shouldn't dwell on the negative. Ouch. On to more positive things, a bop landing. It's pretty simple to just burn retrograde at periapsis to get into orbit. Then again, to set up a landing. Then again, to slow down over the surface. And finally, to come to a stop. Kind of. And a perfect landing. But without actual control, I can't get to pole. Or can I? I give the probe a little gas to get aiming markers, then aim radial out and give it some gas. Then I aim prograde and burn into Jool orbit. At the ascending node, I fix my tilt, and then I burn until I get encounter markers. Then I see an encounter with pole that looks a lot like the encounter I had with Bop, so I burn retrograde to get it close. It's probably about as close as I can hope to get it here. On approach, I see I'm too high and inside, and avoiding any baseball jokes, I burn first anti-normal, then radial, and get my encounter. I tweak it with short little bursts, burn into orbit, come in for my landing. Note that I'm traveling 133 meters per second and have a whole 255 left in the tank. That's a pretty good margin. Looks like this is going to just work. This hill here will be our final resting place, one way or another. That spike there is looming, so I hit the gas. Let's say I overburned on purpose here so I could flip over and get the antenna on top of the ship. Landing now is a foregone conclusion, but still, a great end to a pretty storied mission. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I definitely enjoyed playing it. I'm HMV and I will, as always, talk at you later.